brutal beating behind a general store exposes a web of corruption that will tear apart an entire Wyoming town. Sam Mackenzie, a widowed cowboy haunted by his past failures, discovers 16-year-old Grace bloodied and clutching a medical textbook after her stepfather's vicious attack. When Grace's remarkable healing abilities begin saving lives that the town doctor cannot, powerful men realize she threatens their deadly secrets. Sam Mackenzie thought he was saving one girl, but Grace Whitmore was about to save them all. The courtroom held its breath like a dying man's last moment. Every face turned toward the young woman standing before Judge Cornelius Whitmore's bench. Her spine was straight as church timber. Her voice cut through the silence like a blade through morning frost. "State your name for the record." "Grace Whitmore, daughter of Judge Cornelius Whitmore." The words hit the packed room like thunder after lightning. Men shot to their feet. Women gasped behind gloved hands. The judge's gavel trembled in his grip like a leaf before winter's first storm. Grace's dark eyes never left her father's face. The man who had abandoned her 16 years ago now stared back with the hollow look of a man watching his own grave being dug. "I accuse my father of abandoning me to Ezra Mills, knowing full well the kind of man he was. I accuse this court of protecting those who profit from human misery." Judge Whitmore's face had turned the color of old parchment. His voice came out as dry as desert wind. "Young lady, do you understand the gravity of what you're suggesting? This could destroy everything." Grace tilted her head. The gesture held no mercy. Everything built on suffering deserves to burn. The courtroom erupted into chaos. Voices rose like wind before a tornado. But Grace stood still as stone in a river, watching her father's world crumble around him. 6 months earlier, the Wyoming Territory morning had dawned cold and unforgiving. Sam Mackenzie rode into Copper Falls with dust on his boots and grief still heavy on his shoulders. 2 years since Margaret's death, 2 years of empty conversations with his own shadow. He tied his horse outside Morrison's general store. The sun was climbing toward noon, but the alley behind the building lay in shadow deep as a well. That's where he found her. The girl was crumpled against the wooden planks like discarded cloth. Blood had dried on her torn dress. Her face was swollen, but her hand still clutched something against her chest. A book. Sam knelt beside her. She stirred at his approach, eyes wide with the kind of fear that comes from too much learning about the world's cruelty. "Easy now," he said. His voice came out rougher than he intended. She tried to scramble away, but her body wouldn't obey. Sam saw the careful way she moved, protecting ribs that might be cracked. "Who did this to you?" She shook her head. Words seemed to cost her too much. Sam glanced at the book in her hands. Gray's Anatomy. The leather cover was worn smooth by countless readings. Strange thing for a girl to carry. Stranger still for one who could read it. "You got somewhere to go?" Another shake of her head. This time her eyes filled with something that might have been tears if she had any left to shed. Sam Mackenzie had spent 2 years learning to live with ghosts. He recognized the look of someone with nowhere left to run. "Come on, then." He helped her to her feet with the gentleness Margaret had taught him when handling broken things. The eyed girl leaned against him like a wounded bird, but she kept that book pressed tight to her chest. The ride to his ranch passed in silence, broken only by hoofbeats and wind through tall grass. The girl sat behind him on his horse, her presence light as morning mist, but somehow heavier than all his grief combined. Sheriff Clayton was waiting by the ranch gate. His star caught the afternoon light like a warning. "Heard you found yourself. Some trouble in town, Mackenzie." Sam helped the girl down from his horse. She stayed close to his shadow, eyes fixed on the ground. "Found someone who needed help. Folks are talking, saying she belongs to Ezra Mills, saying she ran off." Sam's jaw tightened. Ezra Mills owned half the businesses in Copper Falls and most of the men who ran them. The kind of man who measured everything by what it could earn him. "She's hurt. That's all I need to know." Clayton shifted in his saddle. His horse sensed the tension and sidestepped nervously. "Mills is asking questions. He wants his property back." The word hung in the air like smoke from a distant fire. Property. Sam felt something cold settle in his chest. "This is still my land, Clayton." The sheriff nodded slowly. His eyes found the girl, took in her injuries with the careful attention of a man who had seen too much and learned to look away. "For now, but this ain't gonna end well for either of you." He rode away, leaving dust devils spinning in his wake. Inside the house, Sam lit the oil lamp and watched shadows dance across familiar walls. The girl stood in his doorway like she was afraid to enter without permission. "What's your name?" "Gracie." The word came out barely above a whisper. "Gracie Johnson." Sam nodded, though something in her voice suggested the name fit her about as well as borrowed clothes. He showed her to Margaret's old sewing room. The bed was narrow but clean. Sunlight filtered through gingham curtains his wife had sewn years ago. "You can rest here. There's water in the basin." Gracie's eyes found the bookshelf in the corner. Medical texts mostly. Margaret's collection from her days as the town's unofficial healer before consumption took her voice, then her breath, then everything else. "Your wife was a doctor?" "Near enough. Folks came to her when they couldn't afford the real one, or when the real one was too drunk to help." Gracie approached the books with the reverence most people reserved for church. Her fingers traced the spine of one volume like she was greeting an old friend. "She taught you to read?" Sam shook his head. "Learned that somewhere else?" He left her alone with Margaret's books and went to tend his horses. Outside, the wind carried the scent of approaching weather. Storm clouds gathered on the horizon like dark thoughts clustering in a troubled mind. When he returned an hour later, he found Gracie in the barn. She knelt beside his injured mare, hands steady as she cleaned a deep cut on the animal's flank. The horse stood perfectly still, sensing competent care. "Where did you learn to do that?" Gracie didn't look up from her work. "Same place I learned to read." Her hands moved with practiced precision, cleaning the wound with antiseptic solution from Margaret's medical kit. She sutured the cut with small, even stitches that would heal clean and straight. Sam watched in silence. The girl worked like someone who had done this before. Many times. On wounds worse than any horse should carry. When she finished, the mare nuzzled her shoulder with unusual gentleness. "She likes you." Gracie finally met his eyes. In the lamplight he saw intelligence, there, sharp and careful like a blade kept hidden until needed. Animals know when someone's trying to help them. And people? She turned back to gathering the medical supplies. Her movements were economical, wasting nothing. People are harder to convince. That night, Sam lay awake listening to the wind test his windows and doors. Down the hall he could hear Gracie moving restlessly. The sounds of someone who had forgotten how to sleep without fear. He thought about Margaret's books, about the careful way Gracie had handled them, about hands that could heal and eyes that held too much knowledge for someone so young. Outside, storm clouds covered the moon like a secret the sky refused to tell. Word traveled through Copper Falls like wildfire through dry grass. The Mackenzie Ranch had a healer. Not the kind who charged silver dollars and smelled of whiskey. The kind who actually made people well. It started with Mary Hutchinson's baby. The child had been burning with fever for 3 days. Dr. Webb prescribed laudanum and bleeding. The baby grew worse. Mary's desperation outweighed her fear of town gossip. She arrived at Sam's ranch under cover of darkness, her infant wrapped in a quilt that had seen better years. Gracie met her at the kitchen door, without surprise, as if she had been expecting this moment since the day Sam found her. The baby's lips were blue. His breathing came in shallow gasps. Gracie placed her ear to his chest, listening to sounds only she could interpret. Pneumonia. But not from cold. From something he breathed. Mary's face crumpled. Dr. Webb said, "It was God's will." Gracie's hands moved over the child with the confidence of someone who had wrestled death before and won. She prepared a mixture from Margaret's herb collection, adding measurements that seemed to come from memory rather than any written recipe. The baby drank the medicine without fuss. Within an hour, his breathing eased. By dawn, the fever had broken. Mary wept as she held her son. No words passed between the women, but understanding settled between them like morning mist. Others followed. Sarah Chen brought her husband when his broken arm healed crooked under Dr. Webb's care. Gracie reset the bone with careful precision, splinting it properly this time. The Reverend's wife came with a growth on her neck that Webb had declared incurable. Gracie identified it as a simple cyst and removed it with steady hands. Each success brought more desperate families to Sam's door. They came in darkness, paid what they could, and left with hope they had not carried in months. Dr. Harrison Webb noticed the change. His patients stopped returning. His income dwindled like a creek in drought. He began asking questions around town with the persistence of a man watching his livelihood disappear. The fever came, with October's first frost. It struck without pattern or warning. The school teacher collapsed during morning lessons. The blacksmith's wife took to her bed with chills that shook the house. Within days, half the town lay sick. Dr. Webb prescribed his usual remedies: bloodletting for the fever, mercury for the chills, laudanum for the pain. His patients grew sicker. The secret pilgrimages to Sam's ranch became a steady stream. Wagons rolled through the night carrying the desperate and dying. Gracie worked without sleep, moving between makeshift beds Sam had arranged in the barn. Her treatments were different. She focused on hydration and rest. She used willow bark for fever, ginger for nausea, honey for strength, simple remedies that seemed to work when expensive medicines failed. Sam watched her work with growing amazement and deepening concern. The girl who had arrived broken and afraid now commanded respect from hardened ranchers and desperate mothers alike. But each person she saved brought new attention to their hidden refuge. Sheriff Clayton appeared one morning as Gracie tended to a rancher's daughter. His face carried the weight of a man caught between duty and conscience. "This has to—" "Stop, Mackenzie!" Sam met him at the gate. The sheriff's horse stamped nervously, sensing the tension that had settled over the ranch like storm clouds. "What has to stop? Helping people?" "Dr. Webb is filing complaints. Says you're harboring someone practicing medicine without license. Webb's treatments are killing people." Clayton's jaw worked like he was chewing words too bitter to swallow. "That's not my concern. Law's the law." "Whose law? Yours or Ezra Mills?" The sheriff's hand moved instinctively toward his gun, then stopped. The gesture spoke louder than any words. "You're walking a dangerous line, Sam." That night, Gracie found Sam sitting on the porch, staring into darkness that seemed to stretch beyond the horizon. She settled beside him without invitation, her presence as natural as evening shadow. "You're worried?" Sam nodded. "They're going to come for you eventually." "I know." Her voice held no fear, only the quiet acceptance of someone who had always known safety was temporary. "There's something I haven't told you," Sam said, "about why I came here." Gracie waited. She had learned the value of silence when words cost too much. "I used to be a Pinkerton detective, back in Chicago. Had a case involving a robbery, found evidence that pointed to an innocent man. Presented it anyway because my superiors demanded a conviction." The words came out like stones pulled from a deep well, heavy with years of weight. "Man died in prison. Found out later the real thief was the police captain's son." Gracie's hands rested on her knees, still as carved wood. "Is that why you helped me?" "Maybe." Felt like a chance to do something right for once. A coyote called from the distant hills, its voice lonely as a prayer in an empty church. "The fever isn't natural," Gracie said quietly. Sam turned to look at her. In the moonlight, her face held the serious expression of someone much older than her years. "What do you mean?" "The pattern's wrong. Fevers spread from person to person. This one strikes randomly. Different families, different parts of town, but always near the creek." She stood and walked to the edge of the porch, her gaze following the silver thread of water that wound through the valley. "Something's poisoning the water supply." Sam felt something cold settle in his stomach. "You sure?" "I tested samples, found traces of mercury and lead. Same metals they use in mining operations." The implications hit him like a physical blow. Only one man in Copper Falls had mining interests large enough to contaminate the entire water supply. Ezra Mills. Gracie nodded. But he'd need legal protection to dump that much waste. Someone with authority would have to sign off on it. Sam's mind raced through the possibilities. Legal authority in Copper Falls meant one man. Judge Cornelius Whitmore, the same judge who handled all of Mills's business dealings. We need proof. I know where to find it. The way she said it made Sam realize Gracie had been planning this conversation for weeks, maybe longer. This is dangerous, Gracie. These aren't the kind of men who let witnesses walk away. She turned to face him, and in her eyes, Sam saw something that made his breath catch. Not fear or uncertainty, but the cold determination of someone who had already decided what she was willing to sacrifice. They're already killing people. The only difference is whether they do it slowly or quickly. Thunder rumbled in the distance. The first drops of rain began to fall, each one striking the dusty ground like a promise of storms to come. There's something else you should know, Gracie said, about who I really am. Sam waited, though part of him suspected the truth would change everything between them. My real name is Grace Whitmore. Judge Whitmore is my father. He gave me to Mills when I was 8 years old. The words fell between them like stones into still water, creating ripples that would eventually reach every shore. Lightning split the sky, illuminating two figures, standing on a porch at the edge of nowhere, carrying secrets that could destroy a town or save it. The choice, Sam realized, was no longer theirs to make alone. The revelation hung between them like smoke from a dying fire. Grace Whitmore, daughter of the most powerful man in Copper Falls, the judge who signed every legal document that mattered, who decided guilt and innocence with the strike of a gavel. Sam studied her face in the lamplight. The resemblance was there if you knew where to look. The same sharp jawline, the same eyes that could cut through lies like glass through flesh. He gave you away. Grace's hands remained folded in her lap, steady as stone. Sold me. To Ezra Mills, said I was too much trouble for a man in his position. The words carried no self-pity, only the flat acceptance of someone who had learned early that the world measured worth in currency most people couldn't pay. How old were you? 8. Sam felt something dark coil in his chest. He had spent years carrying guilt over one innocent man's death. Grace had carried the weight of abandonment since childhood. Mills was supposed to send me east to school. Instead, he kept me as unpaid help in his house. His wife taught me to read so I could handle correspondence. She died when I was 12. Grace stood and walked to the window. Outside, rain drummed against the glass like impatient fingers. After that, Mills decided I could earn my keep other ways. Medical training was cheaper than hiring a real doctor for his mining crews. Taught me to patch up workers so they could get back to dangerous jobs quicker. The pieces fell into place with sickening clarity. Grace's medical knowledge hadn't come from books alone. She had learned on bodies broken by Mills's greed and indifference. The men who got hurt too badly to work again simply disappeared. Mills said they went to other towns looking for easier jobs. I believed him until I found the graves. Sam's hands clenched into fists. How many? Dozens, maybe more, all buried on his property without markers or records. Thunder crashed overhead, as if the sky itself recoiled from the truth being spoken beneath it. That's when I started planning to leave. Took me 2 years to gather enough medical supplies and money. The night I ran, Mills caught me. She touched her ribs unconsciously, remembering pain that had healed in body if not in memory. He would have killed me if you hadn't found me. Sam moved to stand beside her at the window. Their reflections stared back from the dark glass. Two broken people trying to build something whole from the pieces they had left. We need evidence. Legal proof of what Mills is doing. Grace nodded. The contamination records are in his office. So are the burial records and the payments to Judge Whitmore for legal protection. You've seen them. I handled his correspondence for years. Mills never bothered to hide his crimes from someone he considered property. The rain intensified, turning the world outside into a blur of water and shadow. Sam realized they were past the point of turning back. Grace's revelation had changed the nature of their fight from rescue to justice. "There's something else," he said. "About Sheriff Clayton." Grace turned from the window, waiting. "Mills has been blackmailing him. Clayton killed a man in self-defense years ago. Mills helped cover it up, but kept evidence. So Clayton protects Mills to protect himself. And Mills uses that protection to operate without interference." Grace absorbed this information with the same calm she showed when diagnosing illness, another symptom of a diseased system that needed to be cut out before it killed more innocent people. "How do we break the chain?" Sam had been a detective long enough to recognize the moment when a case shifted from investigation to action. They had moved beyond gathering evidence to the dangerous work of exposing it. "We force their hands, make them choose between their secrets and their survival." The next morning brought news that changed everything. Ezra Mills rode up to the ranch with Sheriff Clayton and 2 deputies. The posse looked like men on official business, but the tension in their faces suggested this was personal. Sam met them at the gate. Grace stayed inside the house, but he could feel her watching from behind the curtains. "Morning, Sam." Mills spoke with the false friendliness of a snake offering directions through tall grass. "Come to collect what belongs to me." "Nothing here belongs to you, Mills." Mills gestured toward the house. "Girl inside is my legal ward. Been harboring a runaway, which makes you an accessory to theft." Sheriff Clayton shifted uncomfortably in his saddle. His badge. Caught. The morning light like a mirror reflecting something he didn't want to see. "Sam, you need to let us handle this proper." "Proper according to whose law?" Mills smiled without warmth. "According to the law that keeps certain past mistakes buried, where they belong." The threat was clear enough. Clayton's face went pale as winter sky. "I'm sorry, Sam, but she has to come with us." Grace appeared in the doorway before Sam could respond. She had dressed carefully in her cleanest clothes, her hair pinned back with the dignity of someone walking to her own execution. "I'll come. Willingly, if you give me your word she'll be treated fairly," Sam said. Mills laughed, the sound harsh as crows fighting over carrion. "Fair? Boy, you have no idea what fair looks like when it comes to people like her." Grace walked toward them with measured steps. She carried herself with the poise she had learned from years of surviving in a world that considered her less than human. "Sheriff," she said quietly, "I want you to remember this moment, when you decide whether your past mistakes are worth repeating in the present." Clayton couldn't meet her eyes. His hands gripped his reins like a man drowning in shallow water. Grace climbed onto Mills' horse behind him without assistance. As they rode away, she looked back once at Sam. Her expression held no accusation, only the calm resignation of someone who had always known this day would come. Sam watched until they disappeared over the ridge. The silence they left behind felt heavier than the storm clouds gathering overhead. That evening he sat alone in his kitchen, staring at the medical books Grace had been reading. Margaret's careful handwriting filled the margins, notes about treatments and dosages written in the same precise script Grace had inherited through study rather than blood. He had failed again. Another innocent person would suffer because he couldn't find the courage to act when action mattered most. But as darkness settled over the ranch like a shroud, Sam began to understand that Grace's capture wasn't the end of their fight. It was the beginning of something larger, something that would force every person in Copper Falls to choose between complicity and conscience. Thunder rolled across the valley, carrying with it the promise of storms that would wash away more than just dust and drought. The reckoning Grace had spoken of in that courthouse was coming. Sam could feel it in the air like electricity before lightning strikes. Outside, the wind began to howl through the empty spaces where hope used to live. But somewhere in that sound, Sam heard something else. The voice of a girl who had survived 8 years of hell and emerged with her soul intact. Grace Whitmore wasn't finished with Copper Falls yet. Grace escaped on the 3rd night. Mills had grown careless, confident that a girl with nowhere to run would accept her fate like livestock in a pen. He underestimated the steel that 8 years of survival had forged in her spine. She slipped from the locked room through a window she had quietly loosened over days of patient work. The same hands that could suture wounds made quick work of rusty hinges and rotted wood. Dawn found her walking through the main street of Copper Falls, her spine straight as a church steeple. People emerged from shops and houses, drawn by something in her bearing that commanded attention without demanding it. She climbed the courthouse steps like a woman ascending to judgment rather than seeking it. The courtroom filled quickly. Word traveled through small towns faster than wildfire, and everyone sensed that history was about to unfold in their midst. Sam arrived as Grace took her place before the bench, his heart hammering against his ribs like a caged bird. Judge Cornelius Whitmore entered with the measured dignity of a man who had spent decades hiding behind the authority of his position. His face remained composed until he saw the young woman standing before him. Recognition hit him like a physical blow. The child he had abandoned 16 years ago now stood in his courtroom with the poise of someone who had earned the right to demand answers. "State your name for the record." Grace's voice carried to every corner of the packed room. Clear as mountain water, steady as bedrock. Grace Whitmore, daughter of Judge Cornelius Whitmore. The explosion of voices that followed shook dust from the rafters. Judge Whitmore's gavel trembled in his grip like a man trying to hold on to authority that was slipping through his fingers like sand. Order in the court. Grace waited for silence with the patience of someone who had learned that truth was worth any amount of time it took to speak it. "I accuse my father of abandoning me to Ezra Mills, knowing full well the kind of man he was. I accuse this court of protecting those who profit from human misery." Judge Whitmore's face had drained of color. His voice came out as dry as autumn leaves. "Young lady, do you understand the gravity of what you're suggesting? This could destroy everything." Grace tilted her head with the gesture of someone considering a question that had already been answered long ago. Everything built on suffering deserves to burn. Mills burst through the courtroom doors with Sheriff Clayton behind him. Both men wore the desperate look of cornered animals. "She's my legal ward," Mills declared. "This is kidnapping and theft." Grace turned to face him without flinching. "Then let's discuss legal matters, Mr. Mills, starting with the contamination of Copper Falls water supply with mercury and lead from your mining operations." A murmur ran through the crowd. People who had been sick, people who had lost, loved ones to the mysterious fever began to understand the true source of their suffering. "That's a serious accusation," Judge Whitmore said carefully. "I have documentation. Payment records showing money changing hands between Mr. Mills and this court in exchange for permits to dump mining waste into the creek." Grace reached into her dress and withdrew papers she had stolen from Mills's office during her captivity. Legal documents bearing Judge Whitmore's signature, authorizing environmental destruction in exchange for financial compensation. Dr. Webb rose unsteadily from his seat. "Even if that's true, you have no legal standing. You're not qualified to make medical diagnoses." Grace's eyes found him across the courtroom. "Mrs. Patterson, stand up, please." An elderly woman in the third row rose uncertainly. Dr. Webb had treated her for stomach ailments for months with mercury compounds that only made her sicker. "Your symptoms include nausea, tremors, and difficulty speaking." Dr. Webb diagnosed you with hysteria and prescribed more mercury, but you're actually suffering from mercury poisoning from contaminated water. Grace turned to address the room. "Anyone else experiencing similar symptoms?" Hands rose throughout the courtroom. Dozens of people who had been slowly poisoned while paying Dr. Webb to make them sicker. "The fever that's been killing your children isn't contagious. It's environmental poisoning that could be stopped immediately by shutting down the illegal dumping operation." Judge Whitmore sat silent as his daughter systematically destroyed the corrupt system he had built. Every word she spoke pulled another thread from the web of lies that held his power together. "Mr. Mills also maintains unmarked graves on his property. Workers who were injured too severely to return to dangerous jobs. Men who simply disappeared rather than receive proper medical care or compensation." Sheriff Clayton's face had gone gray as winter sky. The weight of his complicity pressed down on him like stones in deep water. Why should we believe anything you say? Mills demanded. You're nothing but a runaway with delusions. Grace faced the packed courtroom with the quiet dignity of someone who had survived hell and emerged unbroken. Because I'm the one who treated your sick children when Dr. Webb's remedies failed. I'm the one who saved lives while you counted profits from the poison that was killing them. The truth of her words rang through the room like a bell. These people had seen her work. They knew the difference between healing and harm. Judge Whitmore finally spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. What do you want from me? Grace met her father's eyes with the steady gaze of someone who had learned to expect nothing, and therefore feared losing nothing. Justice. For the people you poisoned. For the workers Mills buried in unmarked graves. For the 8-year-old girl you sold to a monster. The silence that followed stretched like a bridge across years of pain and abandonment. Judge Whitmore stared at his daughter, seeing perhaps for the first time the cost of the choices he had made. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the weight of a man acknowledging his own damnation. The court finds sufficient evidence to shut down all mining operations pending investigation. Mr. Mills, you're under arrest for environmental contamination and suspected murder. Mills lunged toward the bench, but Sam intercepted him with the quick reflexes of a man who had spent years dealing with desperate criminals. The confrontation ended with Mills in custody and Sheriff Clayton quietly removing his badge. Judge Whitmore's gavel fell for the final time. Court is adjourned. As the crowd dispersed, Grace remained standing before the empty bench. Judge Whitmore approached her with the hesitant steps of a man walking toward his own reckoning. Grace, I want you to know. She held up a hand to stop him. You're dying. It wasn't a question. Grace had seen the signs in his labored breathing, the yellow tinge to his skin, the careful way he moved to avoid pain. Consumption. Same disease that killed Sam's wife. You've got maybe 3 months. Judge Whitmore nodded slowly. I wanted to leave something behind, something that mattered. You did. You left me. The words carried no forgiveness but also no hatred. Simply acknowledgement of what was and what could never be changed. Judge Whitmore died 6 weeks later. Grace established her medical practice in the building that had once housed Dr. Webb's failed treatments. Sam helped her create the first integrated clinic in the territory, serving everyone regardless of race or social standing. But the cost of justice had been higher than either of them anticipated. On a cold morning in November, Grace and Sam stood beside Judge Whitmore's grave. The headstone read simply, Cornelius Whitmore, Judge. Grace knelt and placed a single flower on the fresh earth. Then she pulled a chisel and hammer from her medical bag. Sam watched as she carved additional words below her father's name and title. The letters came slowly, each one cut deep enough to last through seasons of weather and years of memory. When she finished, the headstone read, Cornelius Whitmore, Judge Father. Sam read the addition with something like surprise. After everything he did to you? Grace stood and brushed stone dust from her hands. Her voice carried the quiet authority of someone who had learned that truth was more powerful than revenge. Even monsters deserve the truth. And that is all to the story for now. Please let me know where you are tuning in from. Perhaps we will create a story there. Consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel, and if you enjoy our content, click this video on your screen. I promise you, it's worth watching. See you tomorrow.